Hey, Bulls and Bears, we're back with another dose here. Let's go ahead and get right into it. We've got a lot of news to get caught up on today. The American people continue to go further and further and further into the point of no return zone as far as how much people are spending. Savings dropped once again. We're going to show you the numbers on it. We're going to look at the charts here and a bunch of data, news, and details that's going to kind of underpin what's happening to most American people here. While the top 1% have now gained $44 trillion worth of wealth. The top 1%. Remember, it's the top 10% that owns just about all of the stocks in existence, over 90%. But just the top 1%, folks, 44 trillion. You're not going to believe the amount of increase in the wealth of the top 10% just since 2020. I'm going to show you in my opinion, a jaw-dropping chart on that. And we continue to see these supply chain shocks unfold with the bridge and the cargo on the East Coast, which is going to present a lot of problems over the next few years. They're talking about a minimum of 5 years before things get back to normal in that particular zone. And folks, that's not good news when people are desperate for falling prices. One of the keys of this channel is we look for our prices falling, and there's been a couple of areas where, yes, prices have begun to fall. Rents have started falling over the past 6 months. Um, car values, car prices, used and new vehicles, both down. Well, with the supply disruptions, you might be seeing prices go back up. I hope not, but keep an eye out for that and brace for that if you're sitting there on the sidelines, waiting to buy a car or not. A couple things I wanted to point out here: the key inflation rate, the gauge rose 2.8% in February, so another positive number. Remember, any positive number, even if it's 0.1%, means prices are still going up. We need deflation. That means we need a negative number. That's what we need. We need deflation. We're not getting it. There's too much money being pumped into the economy via loans, via credit cards. Remember, banks are guaranteed life support, so they're not going to get scared because just because people have a lot of debt, the banks are not going to get scared and pull back on the credit card lines or the credit limits, right? Because they know that at the end of the day, they're going to get an endless lifeline, endless life support, right? Because the banks are the critical part of the economy. They're the backbone of the economy. You often hear that the consumer is the backbone of the economy, which is true. But what enables the consumer to keep on spending, even though we're at record levels of debt right now? It's the banks, right? It's the system of money, it's the lending. And so that's where we're going to continue to go, folks. Unless a monkey wrench gets thrown into the gears here in the way money is loaned out to people, then we're going to continue to see this just more spending, more spending. People went further in debt. Inflation up again, of course. But take a look at some numbers here. And this is the personal savings rate, folks. And bring up a big screen here. It dropped again. So we had November was 4.4%. Basically, this is how much people have left over after they pay their monthly bills. November was pretty sad at 4%. December, a little bit worse at 3.9%. January, slight recovery up to 4.1%. One can't talk today. 4.1%. February, though, numbers just out, dropped back down to 3.6%. I thought people were getting pay raises and the consumer was strong and able to put away money. Folks, it's just the opposite. People are having their finances just obliterated. And each month we look at it, except when it jumped up in January, each month we look at the savings rate, it gets lower and lower and lower. In other words, Americans' savings are drying up. And there's no wonder why we see all these record withdrawals out of people's 401ks and a lot of different ways that people are robbing Peter to pay Paul. There's also some programs out there helping people. Remember, we have over 200 cities with universal income programs happening right now. We have a lot of cities across the United States right now canceling people's property taxes. Yes, canceling property taxes. And of course, these obligations aren't going to go away. They're still going to be there down the road. And in other cases, they're canceling foreclosures for people that can't pay their taxes. Let me bring up this article right here. Wayne County resumes foreclosures April 1st on properties with delinquent taxes. So in other words, you could be delinquent on your taxes. You don't have to worry about foreclosure. Imagine how many more foreclosures there would be if programs like this were not in place, right? And this is just one area. I mean, there's hundreds of cities doing these types of things, right? Rent moratoriums. Believe it or not, there's still cities with rent moratoriums. And this has been going on 4 years, right? This was supposed to be because of a health crisis in 2020, going on what over 4 years now, and we're still having all these rescue programs in place. So people often wonder how the consumer can still do this. Well, they're not, because they're getting buried further and further each time we look at the numbers. But the nail's not in the coffin yet, because they're fixing the game, right? The game is fixed with uh, forgiveness programs, prevention programs. Student loans don't have to pay their minimum payments, or their late fees are being waived. Something else too, with credit card late fees. Take a look at this. Credit card late fees slashed to $8 by Consumer Financial Protection Bureau on March 5th. This was just announced. Issued a final rule reducing late fee charges to $8 on consumer credit. And of course, they had to come out and do this because, as we know, the consumer right now is getting delinquent on their credit cards and seeing more of these fees. So this is just another way to slow down the bleeding, to try to keep people's heads above water for, who knows, a few more weeks, a few more months, a few more years. I mean, look what they did in 2020. They turned what should have been a massive deflationary economic situation into an inflationary situation. So who knows what's going to be thrown at this, people. But let's get into a couple other articles here. Another sign that things are not so good. Pawn shops. Pawn shops inventories are exploding. Pawn shops know something about the U.S. economy that the president doesn't. Times are still tough. This article goes on to talk about how many pawn shops are just overflowing with inventory. Here's a picture here. Dave's Pawn Shop. This is El Paso, Texas. Let me bring up a bigger photo here. Dave's Pawn Shop. If I was in El Paso, I'd probably have to go there just because the Elvis guy out there. Have to go take a look in there. But I can guarantee you everything in there is overpriced. I'm always amazed at the prices at pawn shops, right? So they want me to buy something used, and it's only $10 cheaper than if I would have just went and bought it new. I mean, to me, that's what it looks like a lot of times when I go into a pawn shop, right? So a lot of times I'll go in there. I'll rarely ever buy anything. I do buy silver coins sometimes from a pawn shop here in San Diego. Um, the markup's not too bad on it, but I'll probably have to go get my picture taken with Mr. Elvis there and do a goofy looking selfie or something like that. That's probably the only thing I would do at that pawn shop. But why don't they lower their prices? What's going on? Is the lease so high that they can't lower their prices? And if inventory is exploding, isn't that the solution, is drop prices, right? The pawn shops that I see are ridiculous in some of their merchandise. And, I've always wondered why they just don't drop their prices, especially when you go into a pawn shop and there's stuff stacked from the floor to the ceiling. Get rid of it. Drop the prices, for crying out loud. What do you guys think about that, though, with the pawn shop inventories exploding? A couple more things I wanted to get into today. This is sad here. The wealth of the top 1%, folks. Let's bring this up out of NBC, or rather CNBC. The wealth of the top 1% in the U.S. If you follow my cursor right here, we're going to go up to 2020. And then, boom, what happened? The wealth of the top 1% took a parabolic leap into the sky. I mean, it was going up. It was going up steadily over the past 10 to 12 years, but 2020 changed the game. So the more money gets pumped into the economy, the stimulus checks, how does it mostly end up with the top 1%, right? That's because even money given out to the people, the stimulus checks, another example, ultimately ends up in the hands of the 1%. Why? Because people are going to spend it at the car dealer, at the mall, at the grocery store, and the money ends up in the hands of the top 1% anyways, the owners of all these multinational businesses, right? Unless you shop at some independent car dealership or maybe an independent grocery store, which most people don't. It's usually the big box stores, as many people call them, right? So you just bring this up again, folks. How sad is this? $44.6 trillion just in the top 1%. Amazing. That's amazing. All right, folks, where does it end? You let me know down in comments. I hope you're doing well. Going to keep this another kind of 10 to 12-minute video today. Still under the weather. For those of you asking, I've got long-term health issues. This is not something for not getting enough sun or diet. Ever since I was a kid, I've always gotten sick. Every year, at least one or two times, really, really bad. And if you remember the kid, ever see the movie The Goonies, where the kid has to take the inhaler all the time? That was me, the sickly kid, always having to take inhaler. So even though I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't do any bad stuff, I do get sick pretty frequently. So that's why you see me getting sick quite often, folks. But I'm all good. I'm surviving, maybe thriving, at least surviving. Let me know how you're doing. Everybody keep stacking. We'll see you in the next video. Bye for now. Peace.